Hello, I'm Lexi, and this is what you should know. So I struggle how to open these episodes because I tend to record on the day of my late shift. So I'm recording bright and early and want to say good morning. But that being said, I have no idea when you're listening to this. You could be listening to this first thing in the morning when you're on your way to work or school, or you could be going to the gym, or this could be, partway through your day running errands on your break in the afternoon or in the evening, doing cooking or cleaning or studying or just trying to listen to something to wind down with. But regardless of when you listen, hello. Now, I'm actually really excited to do this episode. I have been following this case for the last few months and it has finally reached its conclusion. And by conclusion, I mean as in the Monday where I released the Harold Holt episode is the Monday that the sentencing was finally handed down. And my goodness, I will get into detail, but my goodness. That being said, before we do jump in, I do have a request for you all. With this being a modern case from 2017, and with the conviction having been handed down in 2021, and as I said, last week was when the sentencing hit, please promise me one thing. One itty bitty bitty thing. So small you won't even notice. Promise me that you will not take to Facebook to harass the families of those involved. They deserve to be left alone. They have been through enough. Thank you in advance. It really means a lot to me, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to them not to have to face this. And with that being said, this is what you should know about the Walcha widow. Starting with Mathew Dunbar, who was born in 1974. He was an only child, and many of his friends described him as so kind that he would offer you the shirt off of his back if you needed it. He was trustworthy, loyal, hardworking, and just all around beautiful. Mathew's parents were sheep farmers and owned a property located in Walcha, New South Wales, called Pandora. It was a large property, and altogether, livestock included, is worth about $3.5 million. That's no small amount of change right there. In 2007, Mathew's father passed away, which meant the farm was handed over to him to run from there on, making him the third generation in a row to do so. He worked hard to put the farm in a better condition, but due to that dedication, he never really settled down to have a family of his own. Now, that being said, there is nothing wrong with not wanting to have a family and preferring to focus on your career. If that's what you want in life, by all means, do not let anyone tell you that it's a terrible idea. It is your life, live it how you want. However, as Mathew's mother had stated in interviews, he really did just want to be part of a family. Reading about this man, he really did sound like such a sweet and loving man who really did not deserve what he got, and he deserved so much better. It really does break my heart. But unfortunately, sometimes when people want love and they think they've found it, they do not notice what would otherwise be obvious red flags. And I say that as someone who has blindly ignored so many red flags in my past. I do not cast stones in a glass house, people. Towards the end of 2014, Mathew installed some dating apps to try his luck at love, and he thought he had won when he met a woman named Natasha Crossman. His friends recalled how excited he was about meeting her, as she seemed genuinely, deeply interested in him. She would initiate conversations and really chase him. Mathew wasn't used to this kind of attention and fell pretty hard for her, and who can really blame him? Imagine it. You've been single, and suddenly someone you find very attractive is sliding into your DMs and chasing you down for attention? Tell me you wouldn't be flattered. I sure should know I would be. Mathew had always felt like he was the one going the extra mile for people who were just not that interested. So this was very refreshing. And to add to it, Natasha already had children, so this came with an instant family. Now I know for a lot of people that sounds absolutely horrible, but Mathew was in his 40s, and her having 3 children really was a bonus. To him, Natasha was smart, funny, and a very dedicated mother and partner, so he fell heavily in love with her. But he did miss some important red flags. She wanted to move in relatively quickly with her children. Mathew allowed this happily, as it was the next step, and he had no intentions on leaving his farm. Keep in mind, it was late 2014 when they started dating, and by Christmas of that year, they were living together, and this relationship was only intensifying more and more. From what I could find regarding this relationship, Natasha was almost definitely using abusive tactics to push forward. These tactics likely involved forms of love bombing, which is an attempt to influence a person by demonstrations of attention and affection. So that can be words of affirmation, gifts, giving them physical forms of attention and affection. But she would have also then been emotionally pressuring Mathew into what she wanted. So this would have included things like moving in as early as she did with her children, and then about 6 months into the relationship, started expressing how much she wanted to be put into his will as the sole beneficiary. I don't know about you, but to me, it is a pretty big red flag that just so happens to also scream run. At first, Mathew seemed reluctant, probably thinking about how they really had only just started dating, but Natasha kept pushing, and the text messages between them, later used as evidence, showed that. In March of 2015, she sent a message saying, "Don't forget to change your will." That month, Mathew did not do as she had requested. The next month, she sent, "Can you promise to do one thing for me this week? Call your solicitor to book an appointment to sort out your will." Natasha ended up double texting him as he didn't respond right away, and she sent him a message 6 minutes later saying, "Okay, your silence says it all." She really is laying it on thick, but if she is constantly in his ear with this kind of behavior, it is hard to see those actions for what they really are, and he would likely start to feel quite bad. But Mathew still didn't put her into his will. We cannot say for sure whether it was because he was trying to remain strong against her, or if he just didn't have the time. What needs to be remembered here as well is that Mathew was running a sheep farm. I am yet to meet a farmer who has an abundance of time in their schedule to just go randomly meet with a solicitor. However, in May of 2015, Mathew sent Natasha a message saying, "Rang solicitor and organised will change. I love you so much, beautiful." Followed up with an abundance of hugs and kisses. And with that, Mathew's days were numbered. But let's backtrack on Natasha's timeline first. In 2007, Natasha married paramedic Colin Crossman. I was initially confused as to when she did marry him, as on her Facebook page it stated the 17th of October 2010, but in news articles it then stated 2007. And I'm honestly not ready to sign up and start paying for a subscription to have access to births, deaths, and marriages. Although that is definitely something I would like to do eventually. This relationship didn't have a lot listed in regards to what happened. But the general theory is it was not a healthy relationship, and there was a decent amount of arguing. I assume that maybe Colin Crossman had then come face to face with the same abusive tactics that Natasha would then later use on Mathew Dunbar. But in the early hours of January 16, 2009, Natasha went out to their garage in the middle of the night, picked up a hammer, and hit him in the side of the temple while he slept. Colin was then promptly taken to hospital, where Natasha created a story and stuck to it. According to her, the brutal attack was carried out by an intruder. Colin had no reason to not believe her. However, 3 days later, Natasha had sedated him with a large amount of drugs and then set fire to the house. She tried to cover up this attempt on his life by grabbing her children and running outside screaming for the neighbours to call 000. Thankfully, Colin survived and woke up in the Tamworth hospital. As police investigated the fire, they found internet searches on Natasha's computer referencing the drugs that had been found in Colin's system, and also that she had taken out a life insurance policy on Colin that would pay out $700,000 in the event of his death. It's always the life insurance that gets people caught. However, Natasha pled guilty to lesser charges in 2012 and only spent 2 years and 11 months in prison. Colin maintained a relationship with his children, visiting them often at Mathew Dunbar's property. However, he and Natasha never divorced. In May of 2015, around the time that Mathew Dunbar had signed Natasha into his will, was when she was arrested again. This time, she was taken into custody for stealing a credit card from her now ex-boyfriend, Fred Nicholson. Natasha tried to press counter charges of assault, but they didn't come to fruition as she then had to spend roughly 18 months in prison. At this time, Natasha was still on parole from trying to burn her house down with her husband still inside. Mathew stood by her during this time because he loved her. It was really heartbreaking because deep down, she didn't return those feelings at all. Now, Walcha is a very small town, and the issue with this is that news travels really fast. There was a lot of talk amongst Mathew's friends because of Natasha's previous history, and people said straight away that she's a gold digger. Allegedly, a lot of Mathew's friends had warned him against Natasha, and he wouldn't talk to those friends again. Friends claimed that he wouldn't accept it. Lance Partridge said, "I could tell he was starting to suspect and starting to wish that he wasn't in that relationship." Unfortunately, he would not get to leave that relationship alive. This relationship began to spiral, and Mathew tried his best to work on it. Natasha appeared to be losing interest in him. She would then also make a lot of demands and would start fights, saying really nasty things to him. It was heartbreaking for him, as he really did believe that this was the woman that he was supposed to marry, and he could now see that it likely wasn't going to be that way. I almost wonder if he was trying his hardest to be the optimist, and figured that if he just got past this rough patch, that everything would be okay. It's a common trap to fall into. Even I've fallen into it, thinking that maybe, just maybe, if we hold on and make it to next month, we can fix what is going wrong. But the truth is, only someone in love gives that chance. The other person would be working on it too if they really were in love, but they're usually not. And sometimes it really is better to just walk away. In mid-June of 2017, Mathew was committed to a mental health ward at the Tamworth Hospital, where he spent a few days. That day, he and Natasha had had a really bad fight that triggered Mathew so deeply that he threatened to commit suicide over text message. Natasha did not respond to that text at all, and when she finally did send him another message 6 hours later, it was a request for him to go buy her some bread. 6 hours with no response, and all she can say is, "Can you go get me some bread?" Meanwhile, while begging him to then put her onto his will and not responding after 6 minutes, she's double texting. There is something very wrong with this woman. During court proceedings later, it was brought up by friends of Mathew that Natasha had on several occasions goaded him on to kill himself. It really does break my heart, because from the outside looking in, you can really see how little Natasha cares for him, and how badly she is damaging him. Not damaging, breaking, destroying. But from the inside, we can only imagine what Mathew was feeling, likely wondering what he had done wrong, and unsure if he can leave without it causing significant damage to her. If you are ever finding yourself in this position, I will have listed support numbers in the show notes. The show notes, if you are unsure, is in the episode description. If you are safe enough to do so, please reach out for help. Please. I don't want to have to research about you later. You matter, and so many people care about you. In the lead up to Mathew's death in August of 2017, Natasha tried twice to kill him. One attempt was to cause him to overdose on her child's ADHD medication in June, where he was seen by police to be slurring his words, unsteady on his feet, with a very dry mouth and extremely pale, which is consistent with a drug overdose. And then Natasha sent a message off of Mathew's phone to herself saying, "I am sorry, beautiful lady, for everything I put you through. You deserve better than this." No. No, 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 no. Mathew deserved better than Natasha. I can't even. The other attempt on his life was to inject a veterinary sedative into his leg. The injury this caused was initially linked to a throat infection he had suffered while in the Tamworth hospital during his stay after his suicide threat. This leg injury was so bad that he had to go to hospital for it, where the doctors had stated that the muscle had wasted away and they may need to amputate it, or at the very least, he would be on crutches for 6 months up to 2 years. This understandably impacted his mental health. On the 1st of August, Mathew and Natasha went for a checkup to see how his leg was healing. The doctor was quite happy with how it was healing and advised that it was likely to make a full recovery. Mathew was elated to hear this. He finally felt like things were starting to look better, and that maybe this rough patch was finally coming to an end. That night, when they returned home, Natasha made him a milkshake with her NutriBullet blender, and they settled in to watch TV. Eventually, Mathew said he was tired and went to bed. Natasha offered to stay on the couch, as she had previously bumped his leg and said that she didn't want to cause him any more accidental pain. Because let's be honest, she wanted to cause some intentional pain. This would be the last time anyone would see Mathew alive. Natasha's estranged husband received a text message from Mathew's phone at 2:02 a.m. saying, "Tell police to come to house. I don't want Tash or kids to find me." Colin attended the property with another paramedic. When they arrived, they saw Natasha performing CPR on Mathew, who was lying on his bed. The paramedics checked for vitals. He had no pulse or responses, but they worked on him for 20 to 25 minutes before they declared him as being incompatible with life, which is the legal terms paramedics have to use, as they are not able to declare a patient as dead. Only a doctor can do that. Colin has been stated as saying, "Natasha screamed she wanted us to keep doing CPR, to keep going." He then took her into another room and tried to calm her down, asking her what happened when he visited the specialist, as he was aware of his condition. Natasha told him the specialist said part of his calf muscle was dying, and even with surgery, he was likely to have a permanent limp. She then followed up by saying, "On the way home, Matt said he is going to have to sell the farm if he can't work on it." This was initially declared a suicide. Mathew Dunbar was found on his bed with a plastic bag over his head and a helium attached with a hose. An autopsy was completed and results were pending when on Thursday, August 17, friends and family paid tribute to the man everyone described as genuine, generous and gentle at St. Patrick's Church in Walcha. This small church was full, even though many of Mathew's friends were unable to travel to Walcha for the ceremony. There was an outpouring of love and remembrance for those who knew him well and described his achievements and how he was able to make people laugh. Truly, he sounded like such a lovely person. And honestly, I'll say it again and I mean it wholeheartedly, he deserved so much better than this. Natasha gave a eulogy where she doted on him and described him as beautiful, loving, caring, generous, kind and sweet. Some of her exact words were, "I fell in love with him because he loved me when I couldn't even love myself. He said having the children and I in his life was the happiest he had ever been, but we are so much better for having him in ours." I won't lie, this is so upsetting. She doesn't deserve the airtime to pretend to mourn the man that she murdered out of greed. Eventually it came to light that Mathew had been fed a cocktail of drugs. I am going to attempt to pronounce the names of these drugs. Please be kind, I am terrible at pronunciation. Acepromazine, temazepam, clonidine, and Seroquel, which is why Mathew felt so tired. To break it down, acepromazine is an animal sedative. Temazepam, I'm pretty sure I butchered that, but come at me, is used to treat insomnia, which you think those two together would be enough. But hey, who doesn't love a bit of overkill, am I right? Clonidine is used to treat ADHD, and Seroquel is an antipsychotic used to treat conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar, and major depression. It was after this was discovered that Natasha was arrested. To give you a timeline to prevent confusion, Mathew was murdered in August. His funeral was 15 days later, And it wasn't until November of 2017 that Natasha was arrested for his murder. What gave this away mainly is that on the night of Mathew's murder, Natasha didn't run the dishwasher. So traces of all 4 drugs were found in her NutriBullet. So as my mother always said, make sure you do your dishes. Now, with acepromazine being a strong sedative for larger animals such as rams and horses, the police looked into where it came from. Now, Natasha had called 3 vets. The first 2 said no. One was concerned and actually reached out to the police, doing the right thing. One had told her that they had none and thought nothing of it. And the third one was outside of town and provided her with a 100ml bottle on the 28th of July 2017. It is believed that this is what she also injected into his leg, causing the infection. But it wasn't only the drugs they had found. They noted her internet search history. For roughly 6 months, Natasha searched the following. Is there a poison that can kill someone but is untraceable in an autopsy? Suicide methods. Murder by a plethora of techniques including heart attack, stroke, codeine, and injection. Poisonous plants that look like food and how to commit murder. While searching all of this, she was then posting normal middle-aged white lady stuff on Facebook, like Minions memes. If that wasn't damning enough for evidence, she had also searched online, can police see websites that you have visited from your mobile? I try to keep things for this channel Australian, but I haven't seen something so silly come from a murderer since Dennis Rader asked the police if they could track him if he sent them a floppy disk. They said no, he sent it and then promptly got caught, because they can, and he's not bright. A conversation between Natasha and an undercover police officer has been released, where she stands by her innocence, but at the same time gives away how guilty she really is. Natasha asked her undercover cellmate, did they make any mention of acepromazine? Her cellmate had gone on to respond by saying, oh, they were saying a lot of things. How about the ace one? But Natasha backpedaled saying, oh, that one, I'm not sure. I don't know why I'm giving her this voice. I just am. I imagine she's sitting there playing dumb, trying to be cute, but is coming off as some kind of creepy cryptid more than anything else. At this point, she had not heard what the toxicology report had said. So her knowing anything in the cocktail was not good for her in any case. Natasha admitted during this conversation that I might add was being recorded to Googling acepromazine and clonidine following Mathew's death and stated, I don't believe I had anything to conceal. That it sounds as though I do. Yeah, because you do, you absolute monster. She stated that she searched the drugs because she suspected Mathew had taken them while committing suicide and was wondering whether they would appear on the toxicology report. The entire conversation was played to a New South Wales Supreme Court jury during the murder trial, which lasted from late March until early June of 2021. Natasha tried to change the narrative to free herself from a lengthy prison sentence. She first tried to claim Mathew had committed suicide due to being confused about his sexuality. It was a defense that trial judge Justice Julia Lonergan said she found highly offensive. And I don't blame her for that either. It is disgusting enough to have done what she did, but then to try to drag this man's sexuality into it as if it was some kind of illness is offensive. Back in 2017, Natasha told police she and Mathew had been to Woolworths on the last afternoon of his life and is quoted saying, Matt loves grocery shopping. That's one of the things I love about him. He's a great shopper. Oh, and he's so good. He can always find bargains and everything. And yeah, it must be the gay in him. But the lies don't stop. Remember how they met on a dating app back in 2014 with her making all the starting moves? Well, Natasha changed her story on even that note to Mathew having found her on the side of the road walking in the rain, which is just such an odd detail to change. Was she trying to garner some kind of sympathy to sound vulnerable? Was she delusional and created a lie that even she started to believe? I don't know. I only really bring this part up here to further point out how untrustworthy she is, in case the entirety of this episode thus far has not been enough to prove that point. She also tried to claim she had assisted him in suicide, but then shortly after withdrew this claim to plead not guilty. Mathew's psychiatrist, Dr. Clive Stanton, testified in court. He had been seeing him for quite some time before Mathew's death. Mathew had told Dr. Stanton that he had begun to worry about his finances for the first time in his life after Natasha and her children moved in with him. He was also concerned because their relationship had deteriorated, as Natasha would make cruel comments that played on his mind. He continued saying that Mathew felt emotionally manipulated by Natasha, who accused him of cheating and asked him if the rafters in the shed were high enough for him to hang himself. To put it honestly, Natasha was mentally abusing him, breaking him down to make any claim she had on him committing suicide more believable. And it is because of this that Dr. Stanton considered Mr. Dunbar to be a vulnerable man who was being exploited by a woman. But he did not think he would likely commit suicide at that stage. Crown prosecutor Brett Hatfield pointed to prior incidences with Natasha's ex-husband, Colin, as evidence she had a tendency to act with intention of inflicting serious harm on a domestic partner for financial gain, including through the use of sedatives. During the trial, it was brought up that Natasha had sent a series of letters to a friend after murdering Mathew, offering her $20,000 to commit perjury by lying about him that would assist her at any murder trial. The letter from 2020 says, "I was watching an episode of Frasier when Niles needed him to lie in court and say he didn't know that Niles was in love with Daphne. If only I could ask somebody to say that Mathew told them he was planning his suicide, maybe a few or several days before he passed." Due to this, she now faces 2 counts of intending to pervert the course of justice, which could earn her an extra 25 years in prison. Natasha Darcy Crossman showed no emotion and looked down as the foreman said she was guilty in June of 2021. Mathew's mother, Janet Dunbar, said that she was relieved. "Like I've always said, nothing will ever bring my son back, but I am glad the jury reached the right verdict. If only I could have him back for 5 minutes. I'd say, Mathew, I never stopped loving you. Even though we were estranged, I still loved him." Natasha was to be sentenced in October of 2021, but due to the global climate, it was delayed. As of the Monday that just passed, as I stated at the beginning of the podcast, so the 21st of February 2022, Natasha was sentenced to 40 years in jail. 40 years. That's 4 tens. And it's beautiful. She will, however, be eligible for parole in 2047. It disappoints me to know that she will be eligible, but that being said, it does not mean that she is promised to be released. I mean, heck, she could do all the good behaviour in the world, rock up to her first parole hearing, while she's getting to the point of geriatric, and then get told no. It does make me sad for her children though. They deserved a better mother. But that is the Widow of Walcha. But I do want to speak on a more real level now. Not just someone who is presenting facts about a crime, but as a human reaching out and asking you to take care of yourselves. Domestic abuse is a real issue in the world today. And pretty much for all time, humans are pretty trash. And a majority component of what happened to Mathew Dunbar was domestic abuse. But it is important to understand that there are more kinds than just physical abuse. This includes verbal, psychological, social, financial, sexual, stalking, spiritual, religious, image-based, and reproductive. All of these forms of abuse are just as valid as each other. And if you think, even for just one moment, you might be facing one of these, please reach out. Verbal abuse seems straightforward, but I need you to be aware that if someone is swearing, screaming, continually humiliating you in public or private, if they attack your intelligence, sexuality, body image, and capacity as a parent or a spouse, That is verbal abuse. No one should be making you feel bad about yourself. Psychological abuse includes creating fear, such as driving dangerously, possessing weapons, angry looks, destroying property or valued possessions, slamming doors, punching walls, making threats regarding custody of children or whether or not the relationship should stay together, or even telling them that the police will not help them because they won't believe them. If you do not feel safe, please reach out for help. As I said earlier, I have listed support in the show notes. Emotional abuse is close to psychological abuse, but with a very spicy twist. They blame the victim for all the problems in the relationship, constantly comparing them with others to undermine their self-esteem and self-worth, withdrawing all interest in engagement. This can include weeks upon weeks of silent treatment, and worst of it, emotional blackmail and suicide threats. Social abuse include isolation from family and friends, such as ongoing rudeness to the family and friends to alienate them, or limiting social contact with family and friends. So consider the idea of maybe going out with a friend and you get an angry call telling you that you should be home because they're home and how dare you go out. That kind of behavior is not acceptable. Or even instigating and controlling the move to a location where the victim has no established social circle or work opportunities. Financial abuse is a hell of a tactic and includes forcing the victim to take on the financial burden of the household and destroying their credit rating, or to take on the debts of their partner, or even sign their will into their partner's name. The opposite side of that is then forcing them to become financially reliant on the abuser. Sexual abuse turns my stomach. If anyone ever touches you without permission, break their fingers. Stalking is another one that makes my skin crawl. If they follow you, call you consistently, harass you online, they may use GPS to know exactly where you are at any moment. Spiritual or religious abuse, I feel, is pretty self-explanatory. But if you find someone in your life is using spiritual or religious beliefs to scare you, hurt or control you, they may be stopping you or shaming you from practicing your spiritual or religious beliefs, or forcing you or your children to take part in a spiritual or religious practice that you do not wish to. That is also not okay. Reproductive abuse is just creepy, where they may force you or pressure you to have unprotected sex, become pregnant, or force you into an abortion. They will pass on sexually transmitted infection they know they have, or even sabotage your birth control. Image-based abuse I honestly wasn't overly sure of, but it has also been known as revenge porn. It is when a nude or sexual image of you is taken and shared without your permission. If someone is sharing or threatening to share your intimate, nude, or sexual photos or videos of you to friends, families, strangers, in person or on the internet, on social media sites, through a text message app or anything, please contact the police immediately. I only bring this up because it is important for you to know what to be keeping an eye out for in how you are being treated. No one should ever make you feel bad or touch you in any way you do not wish to be touched, if at all. I promise, there is so much help out there. Heck, if you're not sure and you want help, I invite you to send me an email or reach out on any of my platforms. I am here for you. But for now, I am going to get off of my soapbox because that is all I have for you. If you want more information on this specific case, I know there is a book being released by Emma Patridge on the 3rd of May this year. If you want to reach out or say hi or request a case, you can do so by sending me an email at whatyoushouldknowaustralia@gmail.com. I do post pictures for each case on Instagram. I do occasionally also post memes. So you can find me there at What You Should Know Australia. It is a bit spooky for me because Natasha Darcy Crossman does look like one of my previous in-laws. Like, I actually had to do a double take. But wherever and whenever you are listening, if you have the option to do so and feel so inclined, subscribe for all of my latest episodes and give me some love by liking or rating the podcast. It would literally mean the world to me. But until next Monday, stay safe and stay hydrated. Bye!